know the story. A little girl, a red hood, a grandmother, a wolf. But what if everything you were told was a lie? What if the real story was so horrifying that they had to erase it from history? In 1697, Charles Perrault published a collection of fairy tales in France. Among them was Little Red Riding Hood. But his version contained something so disturbing that it would be censored for centuries. Are you ready to hear what really happened in that cottage? Because once you know, you can never unknow it. The story begins the same way you remember. A mother sends her daughter through the forest to visit her sick grandmother. The girl wears a red hooded cape. She carries a basket of bread and butter. Simple, innocent, safe. But then she meets the wolf. In the version you know, the wolf races ahead to grandmother's house. He eats the old woman. He puts on her nightgown and bonnet. He waits in bed. Little Red arrives. She notices grandmother looks strange. The famous dialogue begins. "What big eyes you have. What big ears you have. What big teeth you have." Then the wolf lunges. He tries to eat her. But wait, in most modern versions, a woodcutter bursts in. He kills the wolf. He saves both grandmother and Little Red. They all live happily ever after. Right? Wrong. That rescue, that happy ending, they added it later. Much later. Because the original story had no rescue, no woodcutter, no survival. In Charles Perrault's version, when the wolf reaches grandmother's house, he does something far worse than simply eating her. He butchers her. He cuts her flesh into pieces. He drains her blood into a bottle. He places the meat on a platter. He pours the blood into a wine glass. Then he puts on her clothes. He climbs into her bed. He waits. Little Red Riding Hood arrives at the cottage. She knocks on the door. The wolf, disguised as grandmother, calls out in a sweet voice, "Come in, my dear child. Put the bread and butter in the cupboard. Then come lie down with me." Little Red enters. She closes the door behind her. She places the basket in the cupboard. Then she notices something on the table. Meat on a platter. Wine in a glass. The wolf speaks again. "You must be hungry from your journey, my child. Eat some of the meat. Drink some of the wine." Little Red hesitates, but grandmother insists. She is a good girl, an obedient girl. So she sits at the table. She cuts a piece of the meat. She brings it to her mouth. She chews. She swallows. It tastes strange, gamey, tough. But she continues eating, because grandmother told her to. Then she drinks the wine. It is thick, dark, metallic. But she drinks it all, because grandmother told her to. What she does not know, what the story makes horrifyingly clear, is that the meat is her grandmother's flesh. The wine is her grandmother's blood. The wolf has made her a cannibal. He has forced her to consume her own family member, and she has no idea. This is not implied. This is not subtle. Perrault writes it explicitly. The wolf feeds the girl her grandmother's body. But the horror does not end there. After Little Red finishes eating her grandmother, the wolf tells her to undress, to remove each piece of clothing, one by one, and throw them into the fire. Her apron, her bodice, her petticoat, her stockings. Each garment burns, until she stands naked before the creature. Then he tells her to come to bed, to lie beside him. She obeys. She climbs under the covers. She lies next to the beast who just fed her human flesh, and then begins the famous dialogue. But in Perrault's version, it takes on a far darker meaning. "Grandmother, what big arms you have. The better to embrace you, my child. Grandmother, what big legs you have. The better to run with, my child. Grandmother, what big ears you have. The better to hear you with, my child. Grandmother, what big eyes you have. The better to see you with, my child. Grandmother, what big teeth you have. The better to eat you with, my child." And then the wolf devours her. He tears her apart. He consumes her completely, just as she consumed her grandmother. There is no rescue, no heroic woodcutter, no last-minute salvation. The story ends with her death, with her being eaten alive by the same creature who made her eat her own grandmother. Why would Perrault write such a disturbing tale? Why would he include cannibalism, nakedness, death? To understand, we must look at the France of 1697, at the world that created this nightmare. Medieval and early modern France was obsessed with wolves, real wolves. Packs of them roamed the countryside. They attacked travelers. They dragged children from villages. They dug up graves and ate corpses. Between 1460 and 1760, there were over 3,000 documented wolf attacks in France. Hundreds of people died. Children were particularly vulnerable. But wolves were not the only danger. There was something far worse, something that haunted the French imagination: cannibalism. Not metaphorical cannibalism, real cannibalism. During times of famine, desperate people resorted to eating human flesh. There are documented cases throughout French history: mothers eating dead children, villagers consuming executed criminals, travelers killing and eating other travelers. The fear was so great that accusations of cannibalism became a weapon. During the religious wars between Catholics and Protestants, each side accused the other of eating human flesh, of drinking human blood, of being monsters in human form. Then there were the werewolf trials. Between 1520 and 1630, France was gripped by werewolf hysteria. Hundreds of people were accused of transforming into wolves, of attacking children, of eating human flesh. They were tortured until they confessed. Then they were burned alive. The most famous case was Peter Stump in 1589. He confessed under torture to killing and eating 14 children, to eating his own son, to practicing cannibalism for 25 years as a werewolf. He was executed by having his flesh torn off with red-hot pincers. Then his body was broken on a wheel. Then he was beheaded. Then he was burned. The wheel with his broken body was displayed as a warning. This was the world Perrault lived in, a world where wolves were real threats, where cannibalism was a genuine fear, where the line between human and beast seemed terrifyingly thin. But there is another layer to this story, a layer that makes it even darker. Little Red Riding Hood was not written for children. It was written for the French court, for aristocratic adults, as a warning to young women. The moral of Perrault's version is explicit. He writes it at the end. Children, especially attractive, well-bred young ladies, should never talk to strangers, for if they should do so, they may well provide dinner for a wolf. But wolves are of many different kinds. There are also those who are charming, quiet, polite, unassuming, complacent, and sweet, who pursue young women at home and in the streets. And unfortunately, it is these gentle wolves who are the most dangerous ones of all. The wolf is not a wolf. The wolf is a man, a predatory man, a seducer, a rapist. The red hood represents puberty, menstruation, sexual maturity. The removal of clothing represents loss of innocence, The lying in bed represents sexual violation. The eating represents consumption, destruction, the annihilation of identity. Perrault was warning young women about predatory men who disguise themselves as harmless, who groom their victims, who isolate them from family, who make them complicit in their own destruction. Just as the wolf made Little Red eat her grandmother, made her undress herself, made her come to bed willingly, the predator makes the victim participate, makes her feel responsible, makes her unable to escape. This is why the story is so disturbing, because it is not really about wolves. It is about human predators, about the men who destroy innocence, about the victims who cannot be saved. Because by the time they realize the danger, it is already too late. They have already consumed the poison. They have already lost their protection. They have already climbed into bed with the monster. When the Brothers Grimm rewrote the tale in 1812, they removed everything. The cannibalism vanished. The nakedness disappeared. The sexual overtones were erased. They added the huntsman who rescues both grandmother and Little Red. They gave the story a happy ending. Because the original was too honest, too brutal, too real. They sanitized it for children, made it safe, made it meaningless. But Perrault's version remains, hidden in old books, censored from collections, erased from memory. Because the truth it tells is too uncomfortable. The truth that predators hide in plain sight, that they make victims complicit, that they feed you poison disguised as love. That by the time you see the teeth, it is already too late. So the next time you hear about Little Red Riding Hood, remember what they took away. Remember what they did not want you to know. Remember that the original story had no rescue, no salvation, no hope. Only a child, eating her grandmother, undressing for a monster, dying in the darkness. Because some truths are too horrifying to tell. Some stories are too dangerous to remember. Some nightmares are too real to face. And that is the most terrifying thing of all.